Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sid, and in today's video I am going to be talking about the plants in Palestine. So firstly, I want to talk about the greenhouses in the Palestinian territory, the Gaza Strip. The narrative is that when all of the Jewish people left Gaza, they left behind a whole bunch of greenhouses for the Palestinians to utilize. But instead of taking that chance to prosper, they ruined it and destroyed all of the greenhouses.
Here, Gaza, we give you the keys to the greenhouses. We're leaving everything. You're free. Become a state. And the sentiment in Israel during that time, I remember it because I was 15 back then, was a lot of hope that now Gaza is going to become the Singapore of the Middle East. But what actually happened is that Hamas burned all the greenhouses, not giving the Palestinians the opportunity of economic prosperity.
The story of the greenhouses is used to enforce a narrative that Palestinians brought all of these problems on themselves, and it isn't true. While the Jewish settlers were still in Gaza, they developed a whole bunch of techniques to cultivate high-quality fresh fruits and vegetables in what seemed like a pretty much barren landscape with little water, and the techniques they developed were the greenhouses and everything inside of them.
Drip irrigation, the most efficient irrigation method on Earth, was developed in Israel.
Then in 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza, so that was going to leave behind a whole bunch of greenhouses. But some of the Israelis weren't happy about that, so they planned on destroying the greenhouses on their way out. But there were some Israelis in power who didn't want that to happen because they understood that it was in their best interests to allow the Palestinians to utilize the greenhouses. Mark Regev, a spokesman for Israel's foreign ministry, said, "We understand that a successful Gaza economy is a crucial ingredient in the overall success of what is now Palestinian Gaza. And the success of Gaza is a crucial factor in getting the peace process back on track." James Wolfenson, the former World Bank president, also stepped up to try and help. He brought together a group of wealthy Jewish Americans who pledged $14 million, including $500,000 of his own money, in compensation for the Israeli farmers, provided that they left the 1,000 acres of greenhouses intact. Israeli farmers would be getting, on average, $16,000 per greenhouse acre. Half of that amount would be paid when they left, and then the other half would be paid after the greenhouses had been inspected. But in spite of that deal, some Israeli farmers were still not happy that they were being evicted, so some farmers took their most valuable machinery, while others destroyed or damaged their greenhouses. And then what was left behind was promptly looted by Palestinians. It was mainly poor farmers who took irrigation pipes, plastic sheeting, and water pumps for their own farms. There wasn't actually any structural damage to the greenhouses, but still that sucked because a lot of the equipment was really expensive, like water pumps, and there was nothing that could be done to prevent the looting. The police were understaffed, underpaid, and under-equipped to handle it, and just stood by helplessly as they watched people loot the greenhouses. After the looting that the Palestinians did and the damage that the Israeli farmers did, there was about 300 acres of originally 1,000 acres of greenhouses that were in working condition. But then in November 2005, Palestinians worked hard to repair the damage that was done. Mohammed Bader, a man involved in the greenhouse project for the Palestine Economic Development Company, said, "We had to rehabilitate the greenhouses day and night to catch the fall planting season." And that they did. They worked hard day and night to repair the greenhouses. They were soon able to grow close to 600 acres of crops in the greenhouses. Crops of strawberries, cherry tomatoes, sweet peppers, herbs, and spices, which had an estimated worth of $20 million. But since Gaza had no seaport or airport, the only way that they could export this produce was going through the Carney Crossing into Israel. So the Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice negotiated an agreement with Israel which allowed Palestine's passage through the border through Israel. It was expected that 400 trucks would need to pass through the crossing by the end of 2006, so it was important that the produce would move quickly through it. The agreement was very lengthy and Israel agreed to all of it. The agreement said, in addition to the number of trucks above, Israel will permit export of agricultural produce from Gaza and will facilitate its speedy exit and onward movement so that quality and freshness can be maintained. Israel will ensure the continued opportunity for export, but Israel did not uphold their end of the deal. From January to March 2006, they closed the crossing for a total of 40 days. Palestine had tons of produce destined for Europe, but most of it went off because it couldn't go through the border.
Their lorries are loaded with strawberries, starting out on a long journey to the Netherlands. Peppers, tomatoes and flowers will also be leaving in the next few days. At the sole crossing out of Gaza still operating for goods, it's a rare opportunity. Just a few trucks are allowed through each day, less than 2% of the number agreed in 2005. Israel's security blockade has meant most produce won't find an external market.
Hundreds and hundreds of tons of cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, strawberries, and peppers were rotting. The market in the Gaza Strip simply could not absorb the amount of produce they were creating. Some were able to be donated to hospitals, but most of it went to waste. And lots of water that was used on these crops also went to waste because nothing was made of the crops. Mohammed al-Bakri, a member of the Agricultural Work Committee, said that 45% of the annual water expenditure has been wasted on rotting crops. He said, "In a thirsty place as Gaza, that is truly a waste. It could have gone to the people." Basil Jabir, the CEO of the Palestine Economic Development Company, said that everyone is interested in buying our produce, but we can't get it out of Gaza. On a daily basis, we are losing $120,000. Israel also wasn't letting imports into Gaza. Things like water, medical needs, and humanitarian aid were not allowed into Gaza. And food with a longer shelf life than vegetables was also being blocked at the border. So the food stocks in Gaza wasn't getting the chance to build up to the 30 to 60 day buffer that they would usually have. So not only was Israel not letting Palestine's economy thrive, but they were also putting them at risk of food shortages. According to the BBC, Israel cited security concerns over the border closures. And Israel was completely aware of the security concerns when they signed the agreement to allow Gaza's passage through the border. The Israel Defense Force suspected there were tunnels being dug to get across the border, so they refused to open the Kani crossing until the Palestine Authority dug several trenches to intercept supposedly several tunnels. For decades, the citizens of Gaza have had to tunnel to neighboring countries to receive supplies and other goods because they have been so restricted and blocked. So while some of the citizens of Gaza may be pretty proficient at tunnel digging, they weren't in this case because the Palestine Security Services dug 4 trenches totaling more than 1.5 kilometers in length around the Kani crossing and found no tunnels at all. And Israel did offer 2 other smaller temporary crossings. The other crossings were the Kerem Shalom and the Sufa crossing, which at the time were not equipped with proper storage facilities. The Palestinian Authority rejected the offer to use those crossings due to possible political implications of using another crossing. Then in February 2006, after the guards who were protecting the greenhouses weren't paid, they left their posts. And then once again, the looters entered the scene. They methodically dismantled entire greenhouses and took them to their own farms, causing over $1 million of damage. After Palestine wasn't able to get their crops through the border, and with the ever-present threat of looters, the greenhouse project wasn't ever able to regain the same success that it initially had. But yeah, what actually happened with the greenhouses was very different than how it was presented in the YouTube short that I played at the start. In fact, almost exactly what she said was in a news article that I found. Israel left the Gaza Strip in 2005, hoping the newly independent country would become the Singapore of the Middle East. Instead, Hamas seized power and ransacked greenhouses, and the huge politician Hillary Clinton has also repeated a similar thing.
They left a lot of their businesses. There was a really very valuable horticultural business that was set up by the Israelis who had lived in Gaza. And the idea was that this would be literally turned over. Money was provided. There would be a fund that would train Palestinians in Gaza to do this work. And basically the leadership said, we don't want anything left from Israel, destroyed it all. That mentality, to me, is hard to deal with.
Even if the whole greenhouse situation was summarized into a few sentences, that would not be an accurate representation of it at all. But what is an accurate representation of Palestine is their olive trees. The trees feature prominently in Palestinian art and literature, and every October and November the ancient tradition of harvesting olives begins. The olive is a symbol of steadfastness amid a life of displacement and is strongly linked to their culture and heritage.
This land, it means my life. It means that I'm here in Palestine, and I like this land very much. It reminded me about my grandparents. How did they feel? I found that every tree reminds me of my grandfather or my grandmother.
Between 80,000 and 100,000 families are said to rely on the olives and olive oil as a primary or secondary form of income. The olive trade also employs a significant amount of laborers, as well as 15% of working women. Thousands of Palestinians have been forced out of their own farming land so that settlements can be illegally built. As of January 2023, there are almost 280 settlements in the West Bank. The settlements are against international law and are a war crime. And many of the olive groves in the West Bank are located in close proximity to these settlements. Every year, settlers attack the Palestinian harvesters, spray their crops with chemicals, destroy their equipment, as well as cut down their trees by the thousands.
This is a good example what happens to the farmers here in the West Bank. All these trees are full of olives, but people here, they're too afraid to come and harvest them because, as you can see up there and all around, are Jewish settlements.
During the harvesting season in 2022, a group of settlers attacked Al-Hajj Muhammad and his olive grove. The settlers were armed with metal bars and stones. They destroyed 80 olive trees and set fire to a vehicle and a water tank. And the Israeli army accompanied the settlers. They threw tear gas and sprayed rubber bullets so that the settlers could keep destroying his crops. And this was not his first issue with the settlers. A decade earlier, he lost one of his eyes in a similar confrontation. Encounters like that happen across many olive groves in Palestine. Each year, thousands of trees end up being destroyed.
Palestinian villagers who are encountering a terrible war by the Israeli illegal settlers and the Israeli army against their trees, against their land. We are here to help them in a peaceful, non-violent resistance to maintain their land, to harvest their olive trees. And you can see the result of the Israeli attacks. All these trees that have been killed by the Israeli bulldozers and the Israeli builders of the apartheid wall. It's a war for life.
And the Israel Defense Force protects settlers as they destroy the Palestinian olive trees.
The soldiers made no attempt whatsoever. They must have seen some of what was happening, but they made no attempt to stop the settlers.
And in 2002, Israel began building borders around their illegal settlements in the West Bank, trapping the olive groves behind them. Palestinian farmers require special permits or prior coordination to access their own farming land behind the walls. In 2004, the International Court of Justice called on Israel to cease construction of the barrier inside the West Bank and to dismantle the sections already completed. Israel did not listen to those orders, but still allowed Palestinians to get access to their groves behind the walls with permits. And even if they were granted approval, they would have to cross through designated gates. But during the 2018 olive harvest, only 55 of the 77 gates opened for a few weeks of the harvest, and when they would open, it would only be for limited hours and then remain completely closed for the rest of the year. In 2014, the approval rate for permits for the owners of the land fell from 76% to 28%, and the approval rate for people who work for the owners of the land fell from 70% to 50% in the same period of time.
Our land is out there, contains at least 500 trees. It's about 50 dunums over there. We have papers, we have everything that says that's belong to us. We are trying here, but they are forcing us back, so
the only time that the farmers were able to gain access to their own land was during a few weeks of the olive harvest. And this all was taking place after Israel had signed agreements to not do it to begin with. In the 1990s, the Oslo Agreement was created and agreed upon by both Palestine and Israel Authority. The agreement created 3 divisions in the West Bank: Area A, Area B, and Area C. Palestine Authority was given full management over Area A. It made up 18% of the West Bank, but was the most densely populated area. Both Palestine and Israel Authority had management of Area B, that made up 22% of the West Bank, and Area C was entirely managed by Israel. That area made up 60% of the West Bank. In that area, an estimated 300,000 Palestinians and 400,000 Israeli settlers live there, and it is in Area C where farmers struggle to gain access to their land the most. Not only that, but more than 70% of communities in Area C are not connected to a water network and rely on tanked water at a vastly increased cost, and that also restricts water access to the olive trees, and that was not what was supposed to be happening. The Oslo Agreement intended for the divisions to be temporary, and that the land would be progressively handed back to Palestinians. But 3 decades later, and the divisions are still present, and the settlements are still expanding, preventing farmers from making a living.
Increased restrictions by the army. There is a lot of big buffer zones for security for the settlements. That's one side, and the other side is the settlers themselves threatening the farmers who are going to their fields to harvest.
The settlers restrict, uproot, and attack for a few reasons. Uprooting is to make space for settlements, and the military also claim that the trees act as posts for Palestinians to hide behind to target soldiers. Destroying the trees is also a method of economic control, and it is also done to simply terrorize and intimidate Palestinians. More than 800,000 trees have been uprooted by Israel since 1967. A number of those trees were centuries old. That is why when trees are cut down, Palestinians have this reaction.
من غلاتها عبطتها على فقدي زي ما أحضن ابني أنا زي حضنتها زي ما بكيت أحضن ابني وهو ما ربيته لما وربيتها
Things have only gotten worse for the farmers since the start of the recent war on October 7th, 2023, which was triggered by the Palestinian militant group Hamas. 22% of farming land has been destroyed in the Gaza Strip, and in the West Bank, farmers are completely prevented from accessing their land. Because of this, the hundreds and thousands of Palestinians who rely on the olive trade are believed to have lost at least $70 million. These posters were placed around the farmers' properties. They say, "You have reached the border. Entry is forbidden and dangerous, and anyone who approaches will see burning trees."